and welcome to episode 8 of Fright Lounge, the show in which the best horrorologists in town will discuss horror in depth and get a conversation going for seasoned horror viewers, as well as introducing newbies to the horror genre. I am Re-Gor from the podcasts Then Is Now, The East Meets the West, and the Cult Movie Lounge. And
I'm Bill Van Ryn. I'm Bill Van Ryn from Fanzine Drive-In Asylum and Facebook page Ruby Doom.
Awesome. And joining us today is special guest Charles Rosenay, who's running the upcoming Salem Paracon in Salem, Mass. Thanks for being here, Charles.
If I knew you guys had such great hair, I really would have worked it a little better. You're looking good, guys.
I'm liking what you got going on there, too.
I don't have much left, so I like to have fun with what I got.
At least we all have the same color.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So let's get right into it. Charles, can you tell the viewers what exactly the Salem Paracon is and what it's all about?
Well, I'm part of a team called the Shaman and the Showman. My partner, Nick Grossman's the real deal, clairvoyant, paranoid guy, who's really brought me into the paranormal world. I've always been a horror guy. I do the Dracula tours to Transylvania, wrote my first book, which was a horror book, and he's got me really, really leaning more and more towards the paranormal. And we did 2 conventions in Connecticut, which were just ridiculously successful. We thought, what's the next place not far from us, state over that we can do something special? And we thought, well, we looked, there'd been conventions in Salem before, but nothing of a level that we're trying to pull off with horror and paranormal combined. And it's this coming weekend, November 12th and 13th at Salem State University. We're just so excited.
Awesome. And so can you tell us who some of the guests are? I'm going to share the poster here. Let's see if I can get that properly. Where did that go?
Well, from the horror end of things, we've got Hal Havens, who old time, been in a bunch of things through the years, Witch Trap, a lot of those grade Z horror movies, but more recently play the farmer in Fear the Walking Dead. Christine DeBelle, who's probably better known for Meatballs and Alice in Wonderland and some other, more comical roles, but she was in Holy Terror. She was in Life Pod, really cool actress. A wrestler horror guy by the name of Brimstone is going to be there. And also a ton. Oh, there we go. There's that great graphic. A ton of paranormal people, including right at the top, the Shaman and the Showman, Nick and myself. Sean Austin, who's right now so hot. He's on a show called 28 Days Haunted, which is top 5 on Netflix. And then you go down the list, and it's all really cool paranormal guests who are either authors or paranormal investigators and explorers or people who produce paranormal events and conventions. And it's just, the right mix of horror, the right mix of paranormal, and then all your, guest speakers, your psychic readers, your crystal ball people, your tarot card readers. It's a fun event, not over the top, not in a convention center where it's, cold and 1,000 vendors, 50 vendors. I'm welcoming people at the door. I'm making sure that I'm hosting the event, making sure everyone has a great time. And, it's one of the great elements of the show is the personal feeling we put on.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this past week, I interviewed Hal Havens, Christine DeBelle, and Sean Austin for a special Then Is Now episode that we're going to put out in a couple of days.
Oh, that's amazing. Christine DeBelle was in Drive-In Asylum last issue.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah, she was. She did an interview. I didn't actually talk to her, but I was really excited to have her in the magazine because, like you mentioned, Life Pod, which is one of the weirdest movies about outer space ever made, I think.
Well, it's crazy credits. I mean, I'm a big Beatles guy and had forgotten that she was in that movie, I Want to Hold Your Hand, which was Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis' first film away from Spielberg. And I'd forgotten she was even in it. So it's cool when you get someone like that and you pop out the main few credits, Meatballs and Life Pod and Holy Terror. But then you read down and, whoa, she's been on all these other cool things too.
and the X-rated Alice in Wonderland as
She didn't
well.
want to talk about, but right.
Well,
Yeah,
oh
she didn't
yeah,
want to talk
don't
about
ever
that.
ask her about that because see, it was actually, I don't know if she said anything about it, or did you talk to her about it at all?
She told me
Or
not to. She didn't want to talk about it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Before I even ask, she says she doesn't want to talk about it. She wants to just keep it out of her mouth, so to speak.
Yeah, well, she meant that literally. There was one scene in it. There was only one scene in it that could have been considered hardcore, and mostly it was just fake sexual activity. It's a soft core. It was something that really almost could have been rated R, except for there was one hardcore scene, and I guess it got really weird. Like the producer of the movie sort of forced her to do this scene, and she didn't
Right.
want to. So I wouldn't want to talk about it either if it was
No,
Christine.
and it's good we're not talking about it here. Good job.
I sorry, I can't keep my big mouth shut.
No,
Neither could
it's
she.
good information. So Charles, so why don't you tell us? So this is going to be this coming Saturday and Sunday, right?
This Saturday
November.
and Sunday at Salem State University, their South Campus. We picked the location because in Salem, there's not a lot of places to park. On a day, on a weekend, you got to park miles away or pay for free parking was the real first reason we picked this place. And it's huge and they're very accommodating. And it's the hours from 11 to 6 p.m. But we're also doing an early bird like conventions do for people who want to get in first, shop the dealers, shop the vendors, visit all the special guests right off the bat. We've got a 10 a.m. early bird VIP. And we're just expecting a great fun crowd. The vendors sold out a long time ago, 50 great vendors. So now it's a case of, filling it with a lot more fans and attendees.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, we just did the Parafest Maine a couple weeks ago, and that was really fun. I think that's where the guy running the show there told me to contact you about
Yes.
Salem Paracon. I just want to let folks at home know, if you're watching on Facebook, I changed it. For some reason, it continued to keep the fact that we were doing live from Parafest, but I changed it to today's topic. So hopefully that'll update itself pretty soon. So Charles, you've got a bunch of other things going on. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your Dracula tours?
Yeah, so we started doing our tours to, oh no, I got it.
Oh, you have some filter on
I
there.
got a filter so we can't see.
Keep it in front of you. We can see it then.
The Dracula tours to Transylvania. Just smacked my nose. We've been doing this since '98. So next year will be our 25th year, bringing fans, bringing travelers, bringing, Dracula purists and aficionados to the unholy land, to Transylvania. We combine
Wow.
the legend of Dracula, the fiction of Bram Stoker, with the history and the truth behind Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler. And it's combined for a 1-week trip, which goes everywhere. Places, of course, everyone's heard of Bucharest, which is the capital, but we go to Bran Castle. We go to Castle Ponary, which is the actual ruins of Vlad's original castle. And we follow in the footsteps of Jonathan Harker right up the Carpathian Mountains through the Borgo Pass. And people who go, guys, there's a lot of things, whether it's a great restaurant, a phenomenal movie, nobody always agrees how great it is. We have 100% satisfaction from our vampire vacations, our Dracula tours. And it's because it's like-minded people going on a vacation, and just we give them the best itinerary. It's really amazing. And it's www.dractours.com. And that led to us doing ghost tours. So we've been to England, Hungary, Israel, Cuba, Scotland, Ireland, Prague, Germany. We've done ghost tours to all these places where we visit the most haunted locations. So having done all that, I was never really this ghost guy. I was always a horror guy. My first book, came out during the pandemic, the top 10 horror lists, the book of top 10 horror lists, and still can't see it, no matter how I do it. It's like that. It's like the scene in Alice in Wonderland. There's one scene that gets pixelated, and that's my book. Anyway, so
Which Alice in Wonderland?
The one we talked about earlier, the aforementioned one. And just more recently, I've gotten more and more into the paranormal, even though I've been doing the ghost tours, to the point that we started doing Paracons with 2 N's in Connecticut. So successful that we thought, well, we got to do it somewhere else, and then decided to do it in Salem. And it's the response is just so great. There's so many people into the supernatural and the occult and all this, the unexplained experiences, that it's great when everyone gets together and has that kindred spirit. Well, you saw it in Maine. It's going to be similar to the show in Salem, but Salem just lends itself to this kind of event.
Yeah. I went to Salem State for college way 1,000 years ago.
Wow, it's crazy.
Now it's a university. Of course, as soon as I left, they made it a university.
Of course.
Oh man. So tell us a little bit more about your books. You've got the book of top 10 horror lists.
Yeah, so that we did. I did it during the pandemic. I had a 70 or so top 10 lists that I had culled from celebrities, from actors, from horror people, from rock stars. And I've been in the entertainment business a lot longer than I've been in the horror business. So I'm fortunate enough to have been friends and know a lot of these actors and these celebs. And I realized I've had these lists on a database for so long. If I could do 20, 30 more lists, I could put out a book. And I always said, I'm never going to put out a book. It's too much work. I don't have that kind of discipline. But I got 100 lists. I wrote the bios. I added their photos, all the celebrities. And I added like stills. If they picked the movie Psycho, I put in a rare scene from it, or a still from it, or a poster from it. And what it is 100. William Shatner, one of the Monkees, one of the Beatles, one of the Munsters, Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, baseball stars, gave me their top 10 favorite horror themes and horror lists and horror movies. And that's pretty much what that book is. And people just love it. We're selling it on Amazon, of course. But I also, go to all the conventions I can, go to libraries, and it's just a blast being able to sign and sell a copy of a book that I put out. And the follow-up to that came about by doing these paranormal conventions, because I thought, well, look, I'm surrounded by all these paranormal people, and they've had just unbelievable experiences. And I said, I've had a few. Mine are book worthy. Why don't you guys and gals and everyone in between give me what I wrote, firsthand paranormal accounts. You experience these occurrences. I want your most amazing, wow, unexplained paranormal phenomenon experience. And the only criteria was A, it has to either have taken place or have to do with Connecticut, because that's where I'm from, or B, and B, it has to be true. I don't want it embellished. I don't want fiction. I don't want you to say, beyond what was the truth. And I got 30 amazing chapters. Did similar to the other book. I wrote their bio, added a photo, and if there was photos of that ghostly encounter, we included it in the book. And it's true ghost stories of Connecticut. I wrote it with a foreword by the amazing Kreskin, who's still alive and is a friend of mine.
Wow.
And I love bringing his name up, because when if you think about magic, you think Houdini, you think about paranormal, you think the Warrens, right? There's certain names that come up. You think about, classic horror, and it's Bella and Boris and Cheney. What you think about mentalism and this unknown stuff, this magic, he was the first, he was the best, the amazing Kreskin. So he had written a top 10 list for me for the horror book. That was kick-ass. He really gave me a great list. I was surprised at how good it was. And then I said, well, you know what? I'm writing this other book, True Ghost Stories of Connecticut. I don't think you really are connected to this. And in his foreword, he tells a great story about him going to the airport and I'm going to share this with you at the risk of losing a sale. I'm going to share this with you. He tells how he would go to the Newark airport, the same route every time. This was pre 9/11. He'd get to the counter. Oh, Kreskin, good to see you. Yeah, just go on the plane. Never went through security. Never ever had an issue, and would fly. I mean, he's accumulated probably 1 million, if not billions, of miles traveling for gigs. And this one day, he gets in the car and he goes on a different route, and he has no idea why he took this wrong route, and he gets lost. And he's freaking out because he's going to miss his plane. But he says, all right, you know what? They always hold the plane for me. They'll know me at the counter. I'll just get on. He gets to the airport too late. And they say, we're sorry. We've never done this to you before, but you're going to have to take the very next flight. His luggage went through, but he didn't. And you know what's next, right?
Yeah.
That plane crashed.
Oh, my God.
That plane crashed. And all that survived was the luggage. And so they thought he was on that plane when they found that, and then called to realize that he was coming on the next plane. And that's his unexplained occurrence, that he thinks, some either hand of who knows what power, took his wheel and made him go on a wrong route and get lost and not go to that airport the same way he'd gone thousands of times. And so he includes that in the forward. And that's just a great intro to a book of great, unexplained supernatural ghost stories.
That's unbelievable. Was he the one that was in Plan 9, or am I getting that wrong?
No. He's famous for Johnny Carson appearances. Right. And then there's the great Burt Wonders, whatever that movie is supposedly about him.
You're thinking of Criswell, who was in Plan 9.
Criswell, that's right.
Right, Criswell, good call. Yeah.
Interesting. So, Charles, we're going to have all of your links in our show notes afterwards. Cool. I'll post them at a later point. But what got you into horror? Do you remember? Was there like a movie that you saw as a kid, or a book, or?
I do know exactly why, because it's in my intro to the book of Top 10 Horror Lists. I tell the story, guys, and I tell this as part, I do a lot of library appearances, and this is before I do a reading. I tell a little history about myself. And I was a monster kid. I built all the models. I got famous monsters of Filmland. In fact, I have copies with me at all times. Oh man, how come we can't get? There we go. Original issue that I happen to have in my grasp. But I say I was a horror fan as a kid, but I really I'm being disingenuous if I say that, because the first memory is my mom sitting me down and saying, oh, you're going to watch Frankenstein. We're going to watch Frankenstein. And I had no idea what Frankenstein was. That could have been Casper the ghost. It could have been the Flintstones. I had no idea what Frankenstein meant. But I knew that in the first 4 seconds of listening to the music and seeing the credits, that I did not want to see this movie. Guys, I never went to bed early. And I was in bed within seconds of that movie going on with the sheet over my cup. Mom was smart. She loved these horror movies, and she wanted her son Charles to love the horror movies too. So the next night, she did up the Jiffy Pop. She got some popcorn ready. She left the lights on. She made warm milk. She got us in blankets. And guys, I watched it like this. I covered my eyes. I did not watch it. I listened to it. Third night, I watched it like this, where I'm looking through my fingers because I still didn't have the balls to watch it completely. On the third night, on the fourth night, which was the Thursday night, Mom said, "You're starting to like this, aren't you?" As I'm reading lines from the movie back to her. By Friday, I couldn't wait to see it. I'm a 4-year-old, however old I was. I said, "Mom, what time is it on?" Not knowing how to tell time. It'll be on soon. And finally we saw it again. So now the question for our young listeners is, what did he do for 5 nights in a row? Did he watch the same video? Did he stream it? Did he listen? Did he get the Blu-ray out? No. Listen, world. In those days, the only way you knew what was on TV was through something called the TV Guide. And in those days, if you wanted to watch something more than once, you were screwed unless it was on the $1 million movie. Growing up in New York, we had Channel 9, and at 8 o'clock, it would show the same movie Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, whether it was Mutiny on the Bounty or Inherit the Wind or Lawrence of Arabia or Gone with the Wind, whatever movie it was, it showed Monday through Friday. So she had me watch Bride of Frankenstein 5 nights in a row. Come Saturday, I think it's going to be on again. I don't understand this concept. But what she did is she sat me down with a TV guide and read me, well, this is Dracula. This is going to be on in a week. We'll watch it together. And from that point, I'm answering your question. That's when I was hooked. Bride of Frankenstein de-virginized me of my horror. And then I've been this nut for it ever since.
See, Channel 9 from New York shaped your life too. It did mine as well. Only
really
sort of for a different reason. Because when they did the $1 Million Movie in the afternoon, where it was the same movie every day.
Yeah.
Oh, you muted yourself.
Muted yourself.
I didn't mean to. I wasn't even anywhere near my thing. It said you muted me, Roger.
I didn't. My hands are.
Do you want me to stop talking?
No, tell us your Channel 9, please.
WOR. I watched it in the late 70s. Is when it got picked up on. I'm from Pittsburgh, but it had become sort of a super station at that point, like TBS. Right. There was one out of Cleveland too, but 9 from New York had the best stuff on. And I always watched, they had a package of exploitation films, like drive-in exploitation films that they showed for their syndicated movie slots. And one of them was on Fridays, Fright Night. And they showed so many things on WOR Fright Night that just became engraved into my DNA. Like Don't Look in the Basement, Terror House, like all these movies that I love now. I first saw them on 9 from New York.
And engraved is a great word to use.
Plus they had all the commercials for like the Haunted Mansion in Long Branch, New Jersey. And it was an additional thrill every time there was a commercial. Like, ooh, are they going to show that scary commercial again?
So I was born and raised in New York in the Bronx and moved to Connecticut later on. So, but as was the case in that day and age, you only got the networks and a few local channels. But there was another channel, I want to say Channel 11, which was WPIX, which had Chiller Theater. And
Chiller.
And the hand would come up. It was like 6-fingered hand come out of the swamp. Chiller. And it was just amazing because it would have Plan 9 from Outer Space and the Colossal Beasts and all those grade Z movies, which at the time were just mind-blowing for a kid. I mean, those were amazing movies. Mm-hmm. And what happened is we had Zachary was our horror host. And I know in different places it was Chilly Billy or Svengoolie or Elvira, so many cool horror ghosts. I think Pittsburgh might have had a great one, if I'm not mistaken.
You already mentioned him, Chilly Billy.
Oh, it was Chilly Billy. Oh, cool. Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah. In the late 70s, I grew up north of Boston. And late 70s, early 80s, we were able to get on our cable system WOR and PIX. So my mother and I would stay up late and watch like Fright Night and Chiller Theater. And in fact, I interviewed a guy named James Arena who wrote a book about Fright Night.
Oh, wow.
And,
I have that book too.
Yeah, it's a really good book. But I just wanted, I know I've shared this before, but I wanted to tell Charles, my first experience was my parents loved horror movies and they would always take me to the movies. Even when I was little, and I have a vivid memory, 1972, 2 years old in the backseat of my parents' car, and we were watching the Amicus anthology film Asylum with Peter Cushing.
Wow. Right.
And I will, particularly the scene in the short story where the woman's husband, I think, is chopped up and all his body parts are wrapped in brown meat paper and they're starting to move around the basement.
Yeah.
That scene scared the crap out of me for years. And what's funny is my mother and I, we couldn't remember what the name of that film was. So for years we called it Chopping Heads.
Oh, that's great. And Amicus was so close to Hammer. It was such a great studio that put out such cool stuff. The film that gave me the willies with that kind of a thing, and I don't know why, it was the Vincent Price House on Haunted Hill, where the old lady just zips across the screen. They probably put her on a skateboard or something and wheeled her. I don't know how she did that. It was just, that's the one that stuck with me forever. I couldn't watch Addams Family because Grandmama reminded me of her.
That's hilarious. Yeah, that's a good movie. I remember seeing my parents took me to the Orson Welles Theater in Boston, and we saw House of Wax with Vincent Price in 3D. And that was probably around 1980 or so, and that was fun. I remember, seeing that in 3D. Not the best 3D in the world. It really was just the ping pong playing guy and a couple other things. That was about it. But
Yeah, still better than the Paris Hilton House of Wax that came out a
oh
while
god,
back.
I saw that 3D reissue in the 80s too, Roger. I thought it was pretty good. The theater where I saw it, the effects were amazing, and it just sort of it was the first time I'd seen it. They'd done 3D movies on TV where you had to go pick up the glasses at the
yeah,
local
yep,
convenience store and you watched it on TV, and it kind of worked then, but seeing it in a theater like that was pretty amazing.
oh
And
yeah,
that movie is gorgeous.
oh yeah,
Movie's amazing, but the difference is, in those days they would just add a few effects that made the 3D worthwhile, whereas
Yeah.
real 3D movies completely 3D. It's, you're seeing the dimensions in it, and there's numerous things to say, oh, glad this is in 3D. But in those days, yeah, it was more of a novelty. I think even Creature of the Black Lagoon, and even right up through Jaws, and all the what did we have, Friday the 13th in 3D too? I
part
think
three was, yeah.
yeah. So I get it. When it's the third chapter, Final Destination, whatever it is, it's a good reason to throw in 3D, but it's always just for the novelty of it, unless it's purely a 3D movie. And I don't think House of Wax was intended to be more than just those few novelty scenes, but they work pretty well in the theater. There's no doubt.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's funny too. I just recently, because my grandson's 5. Well, he just turned 6 now, but he was 5 a few months ago. And when Jaws came out in 75, I was 5. And I remember that being a terrifying experience. So they re-released it. I think it was in September actually.
Yeah.
And so we had to take him to see it because he's the perfect age. And they remastered that in 3D. And I was a little hesitant going in because I don't know. The movie was fine the way it was, but
Mhm.
I was surprised at how well done the 3D effect was. I was totally expecting to just not like it and be upset, and it like far exceeded my expectations. So, Charles, so what else do you have any projects coming up that you want to kind of talk about?
Endlessly. I just put a wrap on a haunted attraction that we do in Connecticut called the Haunted Trolley, and next year we're completely revamp. That's like another good word. We're revamping it to make it a different level of scares. I'm constantly doing book signings at libraries and conventions, but the convention that we're doing next weekend in Salem, we hope it's successful, because I'd like to establish this scenario where we do the Connecticut show every summer, Salem every November, and hopefully, this is a secret, so don't share this, we're trying to do one in Amityville. So
Ooh.
that's like the next place we thought, might make sense on the East Coast to do another paranormal convention. But, I like adding the horror aspect. If I can throw in a handful of horror actors and bring in some horror merch, it's more fun for me. And I think it works. I don't think that the paranormal folks mind that there's horror there. And I don't think the horror people mind that there's, you see every show now, Chiller Theater, not the show that we watched, but the convention in New Jersey, which is, one of it's the grandfathers of all these conventions, started out as horror, and now it's every celebrity you can think of. It's rock stars, it's your Barbara Edens and your, Larry Storch, he should rest in peace, and Jamie Farr. It's not horror, it's everything. And so I guess people can accept that now, to the point that if you're having a mixed media event, and gosh, as I'm talking, Re-Gor, you remind me of Patton Oswalt, who I acted with. Did anybody else say that before?
No, but I have a buddy that I used to work with, and he looks and sounds just like Patton Oswalt, and
Oh, he
people
does?
often say they thought we were brothers.
That's
So
funny. I do a
I
lot of
see it.
I do a lot of acting. I do a lot of grade Z horror shorts and whatever I can be. But one of my only legit cool roles was on HBO's Flight of the Conchords. I don't know if you remember that show, where I played Elton John to Patton Oswalt's Elton John. We were dueling Elton Johns on the show.
That's
So
awesome.
if you ever can watch season 2, Flight of the Conchords, put out by HBO, this episode called Prime Minister, you get to see me running around as Elton John. But in my book, the book of top 10 horror lists, which is available on Amazon. The funny thing is, I put in, instead of putting my top 10 favorite horror lists or my top 10 favorite, horror movies or favorite books, what I did is I put in my very self-serving. I put in my top 10 favorite films or roles that I've been in. And most of them, I look back and I realized I'm just about killed in every movie except the Elton John one. It's either a machete through the neck or bullet holes or a stapler killing. It's really fun to be killed in these horror movies.
That's funny. That's funny. I believe Jermaine Clement, who was in What We Do in the Shadows, was in Flight of the Conchords.
Oh, cool.
He was
Nice connection.
which character he wasn't. He was like Vladislav, I think, was the character. But yeah, that's awesome, dude. That's so awesome. So yeah, so we're gonna direct people to your website. Obviously you've got it on your picture there, salemparacon.org. Also Paracon with 2 N's .org, which is your Connecticut conventions, and also tours and events. And what was the Dracula one? I don't have that listed in front of me.
The Dracula one is www.dractours.com. And the sites for the books, if anyone would like a copy, a signed copy, you can get all the books on Amazon and all the regular places. But if you want a signed copy, for the book of top 10 horror lists, it's www.book, take off the word the, book of top 10, the number 10, horrorlists.com. And for the True Ghost Stories of Connecticut book, it's www.paranormalconnecticut, all spelled out, not CT, paranormalconnecticut.com. And be more than happy to send a signed copy of either book. And I'll have them at the convention next week, next weekend at Salem State University, formerly Salem State College. I'll have them there, and I'll be signing copies all weekend. So it's an easy way to get it in person.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And as you know, Charles, I'm going to be there with the wife next weekend. So it'll be fun to meet you in person.
And all our guests, of course. And you have VIP carte blanche. You can interview all the guests. If I'm on stage doing announcements, you can come up and disturb me. You have VIP credentials to do what you wish.
Awesome. Thank you. I'll bring with the can of horn, the can with the horn, you squeeze it. Yeah.
No, I won't be able to harass you. That's not fair. Maybe I can phone in a bomb threat or something.
Oh,
no, anything but that.
I'm kidding.
That's like a promoter's biggest fear is what you said, or a stink bomb.
A stink bomb, really?
No, I'll tell you what, the biggest one, we did Super Mega Fest a few weeks ago, and the convention was going great, and the hotel lost power. The transformer blew. No lights, no access to rooms, no way to visit vendors, no way to set up. I mean, I was a guest there, as an author signing, and it was just, I felt bad for us as vendors because we couldn't, do our merch. But I felt bad for the fans who came because they couldn't, get in and see anybody. But the poor promoter who, every vendor wants their money back, every fan's going to want their, it's not his fault. The promoter, just unfortunate that the hotel, failed on its end.
Wow. Oh my God. That's unbelievable. I just wanted to throw one quick paranormal thing out there because I don't know if this counts, but so I've got where I'm sitting to my, I guess this is my left, is my laptop, and I'm monitoring the Facebook feed and the YouTube feed. And when I was setting them up earlier, both pages, because I've got them kind of side by side, they kept changing size. It kept going, increase and decrease and increase and decrease. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And just a little while ago here, now I'm doing this right here on my Microsoft Surface tablet. And I think that's what muted your mic, Bill, because all of a sudden after that, like, things would just pop up for no reason. I'm not clicking anything. I'm just sitting here chatting with you guys. And every so often something weird pops up. It's got to be because you're on the show, Charles.
Yeah.
Look, my background just unblurred.
Oh, that's weird.
Well, that thing behind you, which I now realize is Hannibal Lecter, the filter focused on that for a split second too, and I
Oh,
was like,
that's
"Ooh,
fun.
there's an apparition behind Charles."
Well, you guys know that when you go on a paranormal investigation, the screwiest things happen to cell phones, reception, photos, and my para partner Nick, who got me into this whole paranormal stuff. He says, Charles, take hundreds of photos of the same thing. You never know what's going to pop up, and so now I can show it because it's not blurred. I took a ton of pictures of this opera house in Ansonia, Connecticut. This is the balcony, and no one was allowed upstairs. And in this doorway, it was blank for the entire shoot that I was shooting, except one photo where there's that crazy shadow figure. And that was my reaction. Oh, wow. And it made the cover of the book. But Nick, because he is clairvoyant and he's a medium and an empath and psychic, and he feels all this, he'll say, Charles, go, I'm feeling a coldness, take pictures in that corner. And I go, okay, I'll do it. And I take pictures, and sure enough, there's 50 pictures, and in one of them there's these two Nosferatu looking apparitions that are entities that are like floating across the opera house floor, and they're levitating, and you can see their face and their elbow. And I put the pictures in the book because he says, Charles, you're not a conduit like I am. You're not the magnet for it, but for some reason you get great pictures. And that's what made me think of it, because it's the cameras that for some reason pick up some things that we don't. And it's also the cameras that get affected, whether it's laptops or cell phones or whatever devices, that somehow, if there is such a thing as paranormal beings and entities and energies, they find a way to somehow affect things.
Wow, that's amazing. So, I mean, those are pretty compelling. What other compelling pieces of evidence have you come across over the years?
In college, and I cite this story in the book. A buddy of mine in college says, "Hey, Charles, you want to go see the Pink Lady?" And I'm thinking, "Oh, he's not going to take me to a stripper, is he really? That's not my thing." No, is it a hook? I don't have, the worst things come to mind. He goes, "No, dude, we're gonna go. I'll tell you the story when we get there." I go, "Sure, all right, someday." A few weeks go by, he mentions it again, and I'm just thinking, I don't know. I got schoolwork to do. I'm already producing conventions in college. I'm DJing full time. I have time to. He insists that we go, and we take this ride through the really worst part of New Haven, Connecticut, and the neighborhood is bad. And he stops under this bridge, and this is it. We're dead. The Pink Lady is a killer. I'm thinking all the worst possible scenarios. And he tells me the story of a young couple who fell in love right before World War II, and they vowed to be together forever. It was unbridled love. And before they got married or after they got married, he was called to war. It was wartime, and it was just emotional. And he said, "Don't worry, I'll come back. I promise you, I swear I'll come back. In fact, this is what we're going to do." They lived on a really desolate road where you would come around a corner. He said, "When I come around the corner, I'm going to come in a car. I'm going to put on my high beams. I'm going to put on my brights, and you'll know it's me. And when I do that, you're going to come to the window, to the fire escape, to whatever it is, the overhang of the house. Come out in your pink negligee. I will see you, and I'm going to park and run up to you." You can guess what happens next, right? He gets killed in the war.
Oh,
He gets killed in the war. And she's never told this. Or is she told this? We don't know. But what happens is, when every car makes that corner, if it puts on its high beams, she comes out. Well, gentlemen, she died. She died of sadness. She died of broken heart. She died of loneliness. We don't know how she died, but we do know, because I saw it with my own eyes, and I'd forgotten about this until I put my book together, and I remembered the Pink Lady. I went with my friend Ed Piazza, who now lives in California. We took the turn. We put on our brights, and this pink apparition comes out with something flowing and just a white face and black eyes. and backs off, and my mouth dropped. I had chills. I was so scared. We drove off, and he goes, Charles, it never fails. If you do that, it will happen. And I couldn't believe it. And I went with my parents the next night. Guys, the same thing happened. And my parents couldn't believe it to the point that they had to bring their friends. We literally went probably 4 nights in a row. And then a few weeks later, I took some girls thinking they'd be scared and they'd want to cling on to me. And every time it happened, she would come out. We looked across the street to see maybe there's somebody who just spends every night putting on a projection. I try to think of any possible way that this could have been rationalized. And there was no buildings across the way. There was no way that could have been done. Sure enough, I'd forgotten about it. And years later, I remembered and went back there, and the house was demolished because the neighborhood was so bad and all the houses were decrepit. And I'd forgotten about it till I put together the True Ghost Stories of Connecticut. And I put in the story of the Pink Lady, and how I told it is pretty much how I wrote it. And I called my friend Ed, who I hadn't spoken to in 20, I don't know how many years. And I said, Ed, before I put this in my book, please tell me if it's true, if this is how you told the story, and if I'm telling it correctly, because I don't want to fabricate or embellish in any way. And he said, verbatim, that's the exact same story, except I heard subsequent to that it was the First World War, and he was coming around the corner in a bicycle. And when he put on the bright of his bicycle light, she would come out. So there's a chance that the story is even older than I knew, and that the haunting of Pink Lady happened even years before World War II. I don't know. I don't know the whole truth, because who really knows, except the people who carry down the legend. And whether the legend is true or not, I can attest to seeing her.
Wow. And does she still appear even though the building's been demolished?
She does not.
Oh, wow.
She does not. And I don't know if that's a case where a trapped spirit, if you believe that trapped spirits sometimes need closure and need to move on. There's some spirits that don't want to move on, I think, who are happy in their new surroundings, or their, not crossover surroundings. And I have a theory which I'll share, but I think that when her home was crushed, so was her reason for being there. She knew that it was probably time to move on. And my thinking is, if there are energies and there's spirits and there's ghosts and there's whatever we want to call these paranormal entities, that a lot of them don't know that they've passed and that they have to pass on, and others might know, or whether they know or not, they're in the places they possibly loved the most, which is why so many hauntings and so many spirits are found, well, in the home. That's always the first place. But in theaters, in churches, in community halls like opera houses, it's because that's where, libraries, where people spent quality, safe time, where people loved the time they were there. And especially people who might not have had family, who spent time there, and maybe don't want to cross over because they want to keep their spirits in those places. So that's just a theory.
Interesting. I actually have a question. It's one that I also asked Sean Austin and then a few people at the main Parafest. So there's someone I know who had a loved one that was close to them that passed away. And whenever this person talks to a psychic, they say that the person who passed away he's with you, he's watching over you, he's in the room with you right now. So that got me thinking about, obviously there's hauntings where there's a ghost that's trapped between worlds. And then there's also residual hauntings, which is just a recording that's playing over and over again. But if someone has already crossed over to the other side, whatever the other side may be, heaven, whatever you want to call it, how can they still be here if they're not haunting the place?
It's a great question. I don't think they've crossed over, actually. I think they've stayed with a loved one for the loved one's comfort. I think they feel that if it's a mother, a grandmother, a kin, best friend, that person needs someone there. And I think the proof of that, and again, we're theorizing, the proof of that is if they're talking to psychics or clairvoyants or readers, they want that comfort zone of knowing that that person is either okay or still with them. And that justifies that spirit for being with them, because that's validation of why they're at their side. And they might not always be at their side. They might be at their side in time of need, in very stressful or urgent scenarios. Or they may not be at all. And it's just maybe a way to be comforted by the thought that somebody who loved you so much might still there be. I mean, that's what we want, right? We want to think that a loved one is at our side watching over us. And we want to think that when we're ready to cross over, that we're going to go to that loved one. So it all kind of makes sense, whether it makes sense in reality or whether it makes sense for comfort reasons. It does make sense.
Right. Yeah, one of the answers I got from someone that I asked also kind of tied it into quantum entanglement, whereas the entity could be in multiple places at the same time. Could be, hanging out with Frank Sinatra on the other side, yet hanging out with their loved one on Earth too,
Sure. Endless multiverse possibilities, endless theories. And, anyone who says they're a ghost or paranormal expert, bull, because nobody knows. We can theorize. We can think what we think. My theory is that the happy places thing, or that, loved ones and comfort ones. I don't know. I'm the first one to say I don't know. Forever I said I don't believe. And then I realized the things that happened to me and the things I've captured on the phone, that I'd be disingenuous to say I don't believe. I just don't know.
Right. Awesome. Well, Charles, it's been great having you on the show with us. And we're going to actually switch gears, and we're going to talk about a horror movie from 1973. Did you want to hang out for that?
I would if I saw it. I feel, I wish I saw it and I could have discussed it, because believe me, I have opinions.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm like last minute Charlie these days. It's just been a whirlwind September, October for me. I apologize.
No, I so appreciate that you give me the opportunity to talk about next week's convention and to come on and chat with you guys. And in the future, I'd love to return and be prepped so I can, talk about the movie that you're going to be discussing.
Absolutely. Bill, did you want to say something?
I was going to say we could talk about another movie, like something that you want to talk about, Charles, if you really don't want to go.
I've seen a bunch of really great movies this year that have surprised. Barbarian, I loved. The Black Phone, I loved. Smile, pretty close. X. I mean, there have been a lot of great movies in a time where you don't think that today's movies are so phenomenal. There's always these golden age of movies. And I think, post-pandemic, between Scream and, right up through what's come out, has been a lot of great stuff. And it hasn't been this indulgent of tons and tons and tons of grade Z crap. There's been a lot of quality films that have hit the theaters. And I wish I can talk about your movie, though.
It's okay. No, we could talk about. The wife and I started watching a movie called Antlers. That was pretty good. We haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but that's really scary.
I started it too, and I had to stop because my kids walked in and said, "Why are you watching this without me?" When I hear that, I'm like, "Stop it immediately." And then we watched it together, just like my mom and just like my dad watched movies with me growing up. I started the kids. I'm amazed that I didn't get called by, parent control. First few movies the kids saw were Drag Me to Hell, Mama. This is before Disney. I was taking them to see this stuff, trying to get them jaded. And it worked. Nothing, they worked in haunted attractions with me and all this. So nothing scared them, except for there was an age between maybe 8 and 10 where they started to really get it and stop watching it. But they've come back now. It's like they won't see a movie without me. And I try not to see a movie without them. We want to see Pearl and we want to see the new Halloween, even though, it's not getting great reviews. The only thing they didn't care that I saw was the Munsters, the new zombie version. And I get it. I get why they didn't care.
Oh man, I'm having some weird stuff going on. Things just keep popping up on my computer here, and now it won't. It's like when I go to speaker view, it's stuck on me. Well, obviously I'm talking right now, but when you were just talking, Charles, it was stuck on my picture, which nobody wants to look at my ugly mug if I'm not talking.
It's all
Uh,
about, the paranormal influences. I'm so sorry that they're carrying through the waves onto
it's amazing.
onto your podcast, onto your streaming.
Yeah, see, like now all of a sudden this I can't even describe it. It's like the side menu on Windows just popped up for no reason. It's really strange. So all right, so Charles, what would you recommend for young people today? Bill and I have talked about the fact that there's 5,000 streaming services. They have pretty much everything in existence. But, when we were kids, all three of us growing up, as you mentioned before, we had magazines like Famous Monsters. We had programs on TV that would show us the classic films. Where should a young person start if they want to get into horror movies? And what do you think should be some of the first ones that they watch?
I think it's fair to, if they're that age, to go online and look at a top 10, a top 20, a top 50, a top 100 horror films, because you're going to get Exorcist and Psycho and The Shining. You're going to get the best of the best. I watched last night, I watched with my kids Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and they were reluctant to see it because it didn't look like a horror movie. They thought, well, I don't want to see this movie with these two old actresses, and they gave it a 10. They loved it. So I think that's a good place to start. And then when you get through all those classics, call me so I can tell you to dig out some things that you might not have thought of. And the one that comes to mind is a movie by Paul Williams that combines Faust, Dorian Gray, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and Phantom of the Opera. And do you know which movie I'm going to say?
Phantom of the Paradise?
Phantom of the Paradise. And guys, it didn't make it into the book of top 10 horror lists, and it should have. It's one of those forgotten classics. I mean, it's the ultimate horror musical. And I'm someone who loves cross genres. Give me Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein, and I will watch it every single day. Not so much for a new generation of kids, but there's a few that fit in that mode. That's one of them. Carrie is another one that I could watch over and over. And Phantom of the Paradise, believe it or not, is another one I could watch and sing along with over and over, even more than Rocky Horror.
A lot of people say that about Phantom of the Paradise, that it's the one. It's difficult not to compare it to Rocky Horror since they were so contemporary.
Right.
But a lot of people say they love Phantom more than Rocky Horror, while Rocky Horror is the one everybody knows, and Phantom is just a little bit more obscure.
And it's because Rocky Horror had all those amazing cult movie throw-in things that you could do and act out, and it was more. I get it. You watch and you see what other movies could the same thing be done on, and there's a handful, but that was its own special once in a lifetime event where Rocky Horror went beyond being a movie, and it was a theater experience. And I attended the first Rocky Horror convention at the Calderon Theater in Long Island, and I think the whole cast was there except for Richard O'Brien and Tim Curry, and it was the most amazing experience. And I love Rocky Horror because the music is so amazing. The music just transcends. But
that was my thought when I saw Phantom. I was like, I like this as a movie, but it doesn't have the songs that Rocky Horror has.
Right. Although I can sing every song. I love every song, and I love the Juicy Fruits, and I love the little breakaway bits from it. Do you know there's, what was it, Winnipeg? There's one place in Canada that it still shows in a theater every week. It's been showing nonstop since it came out. And it's the biggest grossing film in this one town. Is it Manitoba? No, it's got to be Winnipeg. And for some reason, they had a convention there a few times because this one town has embraced Phantom of the Paradise. There's no rhyme or reason why. But that's the one I would say to watch, and they'll probably hate it, but that's the one I go to when you say what movie should someone know if they're not as familiar with some of the unknown stuff.
Wow, that's amazing. And one of the streaming services that Bill and I love is Tubi. They've got everything on there, like all kinds of obscure 70s horror films, 80s. That's just a really good streaming service, and it's free. You got to sit through commercials, but
So the latest movie that I did, I play the father of, I guess, a rapist. I don't really know what I play in it. I just know my scene. I come out of a bed with a woman, go into the shower, come out of the shower, and get beat up. That's my scene. The movie's called The Bastard Son, and it's on Tubi. So if you're going to watch it, just fast forward to my scene, and then when my scene's over, you don't have to watch anymore, because the best part of the lead in it is really good. This guy Nelson is really awesome. He could have been one of these 1970s revenge action hero guys. But yeah, Tubi's pretty cool for seeing anything like that.
So, Bill, what would you recommend for someone? I think we've talked about it before, but just give us your opinion again on, what movies should people watch if they're just starting to learn about horror?
It's so difficult to say. I don't think there is a movie that people should watch. I think horror and the appreciation that we have for it is based on our own experiences that we had, usually when you're young. Not necessarily, but usually when you're young, you watch a movie, and whether you love it or you hate it, you take that with you in your life. Like, for some reason, it's memorable to you, and it might not mean anything to you right now, but 20 years from now, you think back to yeah, that movie was really weird. I remember seeing that weird movie, and then it starts to grow. The idea of the movie starts to grow. And it's happened to me a couple of times with movies that I saw for the first time and I hated it. And then I went back and watched it 10, 15 years later. And I can think of where I was when I first saw the movie. And now I see it completely different and I like it. So it's hard to recommend movies to people, because I think that has a lot to do with where you are, who you're with, where you are in your life. Are you happy? Are you content? Is something bad going on? These are landmarks to our own lives, these movies that we watch. So I don't think you can go wrong. I mean, you either like a movie or you don't, but I think after you have a few of those under your belt that you go back and you look at later and be like, oh, that really stuck with me for some reason. Then you have the basis to form a lifelong attraction to horror.
I think there's also cases where you go back to the movie and you thought, man, what did I see in that movie? What's the Mark Wahlberg movie where he has this obsession with a girl that becomes
Fear? I think it's called Fear.
I loved Fear when I saw it when it came out, and I don't know, it's because I was younger and maybe I related to him. I don't know why, but I watched it again and it was like, this is so bad, and I couldn't get through it again. So I think it works both ways. So there's some movies that you saw growing up, and then you see it again through different eyes, and have a completely greater appreciation. That's more the case. But there's some that you watch now. This is blasphemous and sacrilegious. I shouldn't say this, but it's tough to watch Bela Lugosi's Dracula all the way through. It's tough to watch some of those movies that we grew up on, which are definitely classics and definitely paved the way for so many other movies that came after it. But they're black and white and they're slow and they're a little droll, and you really have to be in the right frame of mind and the right spirit to watch. There's a lot of those, and I think that the dynamics of the film industry and the pacing and the effects and everything, the Marvel universe, everything has impacted what became before it. And so for us, we love those type of movies in many cases for nostalgic reasons, not unlike maybe a Beatles song or an Elvis song, but the things have changed so much through the years. Boy, I'm getting heavy here. This is too deep. that some of those films, maybe don't have the legs they did at one time, for a different generation. And I think it ties in with, what we recommend. And if I'm recommending a film, I'm going to recommend the Exorcists and the Shinings and the Carrie and the movies that, aren't quite 1930s and 40s, the ones that are the modern, so to speak, horror classics.
Right, right. I saw one, I guess it was probably a year ago now, that was on HBO Max. That was, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little distracted here because of this. I'm going to try and change the view again. See if
He's still having
oh,
ghostly
it's
apparitions.
going crazy. The mouse keeps moving around on its own and opening up windows and stuff.
I have to say that I tried to go find the live feed on the Fright Lounge Facebook page, and strange things started happening once I tried to open it.
Oh, really?
So I think that whatever's going on, it's like getting it Zoom might be buggy. That could be an explanation.
Yeah, but how could Zoom control the mouse on my computer?
It's happened. I mean, maybe not Zoom, but do you use a wireless mouse? Is it wired?
It's a wireless mouse, yeah.
Yeah, and your battery could be going bad. There's a bunch of things could be happening.
But it was both computers, and I have two separate mice. Well, anyway.
Yeah.
We always try to find the logical scientific reason. Explain to me why I went on a paranormal investigation in a place called Dudleytown. And all of a sudden, when you go out to this open field, all of a sudden it's death. There's no crickets, there's no birds, there's hardly any signs of life. And then we're with a group, and there's the one guy who's the biggest skeptic. And all of a sudden, he's rolling his eyes. He's looking at his watch. When is this over? Oh, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe my girlfriend dragged me here. And all of a sudden, we point to him, and we're looking at him. He goes, why are you pointing at me? Because I'm the only one who's not into this? And we go, no, because your hair is standing up straight like it's being pulled by some kind of force up in the... Oh, look, I got my hair like yours now. But it's being pulled by some force that's unexplained. And he's like, I don't believe you guys. And we take pictures of it. And sure enough, there's no static. There's no electrical. There's no reason. There's no logic. There's no scientific explanation for some of the things that happen, whether it be your mouse or whether it be that guy's hair that stood up, which I have a picture of in my book, True Ghost Stories of Connecticut. Oh, I don't have to do that. We can see.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to explain stuff. Let it be a mystery. Sometimes it's more fun that way.
And it's amazing that you brought up Dudleytown. I was actually going to bring that up earlier, and I kind of forgot. Of course, now this menu's not going away. I went there with a couple of friends of mine in the early 90s. I had read about it in a book. I contacted the author. He kind of warned me that the locals didn't really want to talk about it. Basically, it's this ghost town in Connecticut.
Yes.
From, I forget, was the 17 or 1800s. Pretty much everybody there died a mysterious death, right?
Well, what it was, they were all banished from England to Cornwall, Connecticut, which was, I guess, was named off after where they came from. And the British did that a lot. They wanted to, when they wanted to get rid of their bad, they sent them to, America. And of course, we won the war, but we didn't always, get the best end of the people who came over here from the UK. And these British folks were insane. They started molesting each other. They started killing each other to the point where they eventually killed themselves, and the land was cursed. And the people who knew that from years on, well, what better place for occultists to do demonology? What better place for motorcycle gangs to hang out and do whatever the heck they want to do? It became a real bad, nefarious place. And of course, the locals didn't want people to go there, and neither did the police, neither did the authorities, because it wasn't safe. And sure enough, it was closed off, but you could find your way in there. And then as the years have gone by, there's hiking trails in and around Mohawk Trail, which can lead to it. We took 3 different groups, and then we got a cease and desist from the town, because they don't want the association of its haunted reputation and the scary stuff. But I heard of it, also 80s and 90s. And I just, A, didn't want to, I was afraid to go there. And B, I didn't know anyone who would go with me until, this guy, Nick, who I partner up with, said, I've been there so many times. Let's bring groups there and we'll have amazing experiences. And we had amazing experience. The hair was just one of them. I'll give you 2 others. One, a gal named Tracy Burton from New Jersey, who's very, very sensitive. She's someone who's been to tons of places along the East Coast. And she said this was the most oppressed she'd ever felt. Like that was a pressing on her chest. She had to sit. She couldn't even breathe when she was there. She's never felt such a strong paranormal presence. And then there's this other gal, who says, I thought this was such a big deal. Why was there a jogger on the other side of the trees? And we're like, what are you talking about? She goes, on the other side, right there. There must be another hiking trail because there was that person who walked by in the black, pants with the black shirt and the black cowl and the blood. And she realizes as she's describing that this was no jogger. And we go, God, and we go, there's nobody there. And Nick goes, not only is nobody there, nobody can walk there because you're looking at trees and then streams and then forest. There's no even place to walk. And she saw some kind of a cowled black figure that no one else saw in this place where there's no sound of crickets, where there's no sound of birds, and when this guy hair stood up. So Dudleytown, very, very, very special place for the supernatural. And, I mentioned the book, and of course, I'm trying to plug it as much as possible, The True Ghost Stories of Connecticut. But there have been other books, and you read one, of course, on Dudleytown, but other books, and Bill, you probably realize this too. There's history. They put this place is haunted, and it's located here and here, and it's haunted because such and such. It gives you the history of this place, whether it's a sanitarium or whatever the history is. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be a little different because you could read anywhere a place's history. I wanted the true story. I wanted to know what happened to you when you went there. And that's why I think the book is so special, because it's paranormal people and everyday people who gave me their most amazing experiences, that wow happening at all these amazing places. And I only scratched the surface. I mean, I could see more volumes of this coming in the future with more stories from people who never thought that there'd be a place where they can tell their actual true stories of their, ghost experiences.
Right. And in Dudleytown, if you walk up the large hill, that's basically where the center of town was, I believe, you could see, at least, I don't know, back in the early 90s, you could see the foundations of the old houses that were there. I don't know if they're still there.
Just barely. It's so overgrown. You can see maybe tops of where there used to be, or however, whatever remnants are left. You can see those. It's definitely, you can see where it was, but it's so. What you can see even more of is a place called Little People Village in Middlebury, Connecticut, where apparently it's a tiny version of a town, and it's in the woods for no reason. And apparently these elves took over this woman, turned her into a witch. She made her husband build it for these elves, these evil elves, or else they were going to kill her. And once she did it, her husband did it, they told her to kill him unless he continues to build homes and continues to build these for the elves. And we don't know what happened thereafter, but that's the legend of Little People Village in Connecticut. And all those places, the altar, these little homes, these little sheds are still there. I didn't include that in the book because, as great of a story as it is, I don't know anyone who had a haunting there. I don't know anyone who had this unbelievable experience. We brought groups there and we've loved it and we've taken pictures, but there hasn't been that, wow, unexplained moment at this place.
Wow. Unbelievable. Are there any cryptids known to be from Connecticut?
I'm sure. There's a gentleman, Colin Haskins, who's an expert on cryptids, on Bigfoots, on all that, on that spectrum of things. I'm not well versed enough to talk about, but there's a theory that, of course, cryptids, aliens, and the paranormal all form some kind of a connecting triangle, and they all affect each other in some way. I don't know about that. I know that in Connecticut we have a place called the Paranormal Triangle. It's certain towns that connect in a similar way. And I can attest that Connecticut's one of the, you can talk about, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and Savannah, Georgia, and Salem and New Orleans, but Connecticut's right up there. I think any town that was, any city, state, any place that goes back and back and back to Indian tribal times, and also wars and bloodshed, there's going to be residual energy and it's going to be hauntings. And I think the older the state, the more there is of that.
Interesting. And you mentioned using the camera on your phone in ghost hunts. What other tools or technology are you using when you're ghost hunting?
My para partner, it's really funny. When I introduce us, we're called the shaman and the showman. He's the shaman, I'm the showman. I say, yeah, we're paranormal. He's para and I'm normal. But he's got it all. He's got the voice boxes. He's got EVPs. He's got every possible, a piece of equipment. And he went out with Sean Austin, and they had a scenario where the voice box was saying names and having a real full conversation back and forth. And because I'm only someone who gets photography stuff, I don't even venture into using any of that stuff. Wouldn't even know how to use it. To me, it's a CB radio. It's that foreign to me. But they know how to use it, and they get amazing results.
Wow, that's awesome. That's awesome. Hey, Bill, I had a question for you. Obviously, Pittsburgh's famous for some horror movies like Night of the Living Dead and whatnot. Are there any that were made in Connecticut that are relatively famous?
None that I can think of off the top of my head as famous, but we were just talking about one before we went live. It was a 1973 movie called The Bride. It just happens to be one of my favorites.
It was filmed in Connecticut.
Yeah, it was filmed in, I think maybe near Hartford. The location, I'm not 100% sure, but I know that Robin Strasser from One Life to Live was the star of that movie. And it's one of those things like she doesn't like to talk about it because obviously she became well known for the more reputable soap opera genre. So,
was Stepford Wives also filmed in Connecticut?
It's possible. Yeah, I think it was.
So
I don't know. I can't think off the top of my head of movies shot in Connecticut, but
the last film that I was in that I'm proud of was filmed in Connecticut by a great filmmaker by the name of Eric Bloomquist, and you'll be hearing a lot more of him. It's a movie called Night at the Eagle Inn. And I hope you guys do an episode on it one time. It's a haunted hotel. Whether people get out of it or not, you'll find out as it goes. But I'm the first haunted entity in it. I play a cross-dressing, gender-bending. I'm billed as the debutante, and you see me in a TV screen. And what's cool about this, guys, is I'm the first voice in the trailer for Night at the Eagle Inn. And it was the second time that happened because I was also the first voice in a movie called The Sadist with Tom Savini, which is a really bad Killer in the Woods movie. But if you want to Google those and somewhere down the line you'll see me as the dad in The Sadist with Tom Savini. And that was made in Waterbury, Connecticut. And then the Night at the Eagle Inn, which is really good. It's got some good acting and it's got some good direction. And you can see by watching the movie that, the people who put it together have a really great future in horror. And Night at the Eagle Inn I think it's available on most of the streaming services. And it's worth it just for seeing me in that tube for a few minutes going crazy.
The Stepford Wives was shot in Connecticut, by the way. And I thought of another shot in Connecticut horror movie that I love. I don't know why this wasn't the first thing I thought of. Let's Scare Jessica to Death.
Oh,
great movie.
That was shot in Connecticut.
Sure, of course.
Wasn't Coma shot in? Oh, it was in New England, wasn't it?
Not sure about Coma.
But that's cool. Yeah, Let's Scare Jessica to Death. It's a really good one.
That's a Halloween movie. Like I have movies that I watch every year around Halloween. I didn't watch it this year. I let myself down. I was so busy in October. But Let's Scare Jessica to Death is another one of those WOR movies that I was talking about earlier. Like movies that showed up in the afternoon on TV and still scared you. Like when you're watching TV during the day, you tend to be a little less scared as a kid than you are when you're staying up late at night and no one knows you're awake.
Right.
And you sneak down in front of the TV and you're watching horror movies, or whatever. And it's spooky because all the lights are out and everything. Let's Scare Jessica to Death scared me in the broad daylight. It was just so weird.
Was it a theater movie or was that originally a TV movie?
No, it was theatrically
Oh, it
released.
was? Yeah.
Yeah. 71 it came out but it didn't actually show on TV until 77, I think
Oh,
was the network debut. And then shortly after their like 78, 79, it started showing up in syndication on UHF channels and
yeah, it makes sense.
WOR.
That's probably why I hadn't seen it in the theaters, and I probably saw it and thought it was a TV movie. Guys, I will share something with you about the only film that ever gave me nightmares.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Cool.
I saw it. I remember the theater I saw it at, and when I saw it, I was on the edge of my seat. And I remember, even up now through movies like The Strangers, and any home invasion movies, for some reason, those get to me the most. And the first one that gave me nightmares was a movie with Alan Arkin playing against type, Audrey Hepburn.
Hmm.
And you guys know what I'm going to say, right?
Yep.
I do.
Wait Until Dark.
Yep.
And I don't know why, but that night when I went to bed, I was in one of those flu-like, you mentioned coma, and that's what made me think of it. One of those comatose scenarios where you know you're sleeping, but you're not sure. And damn, if people weren't coming through my window, and they were, my room was being invaded that night, and that was the only time I ever had nightmares. It was from that movie. It's crazy. You would think, so many other movies, Exorcist, so many other movies that can give you nightmares. That's the one that gave me the nighttime dreads.
That's hilarious. I was terrified my whole childhood, even though I would go see these horror movies or watch them on TV. I was always terrified. But in my adult life, and I may have said this before, Bill, on the show, I watched a few years ago, I watched Human Centipede. Took me 2 nights to get through that movie.
Oof.
And both nights I had nightmares. I will never, ever watch that movie again.
Well, now it's time to watch part 2.
Oh, good God. I don't know. I don't think I could take it.
Part 2 is that's even more hard hitting than the first one. So I don't think you should.
It's beyond. It's ridiculous, right?
Yeah, it is ridiculous. Both of them are ridiculous, but they are very effective.
Yeah.
Sure.
The concept.
The actress who was in that, Ashley Williams, the
Yeah.
main actress, gave me a really cool top 10 list, which is in the book of top 10 lists. How you like the way I worked that?
Nice.
That was perfect.
It's crazy because I finished that book, did great with it, loved it, Amazon, blah, 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 blah. Doing a sequel to it called what else but The Bride of the Book of Top 10 Horror Lists. And I got a great list from the gal, you'll know, I forgot her name, and you'll know who it is if you watch American Horror Story, but she played Pepper, the girl who's in Freaks with the pinhead.
Oh,
Are you guys into?
I didn't see. I've
I've
only seen a couple of seasons of American Horror Story, and I did not see Freaks.
Oh, right. So if you did, you would know who I'm talking about. And she gave me a list, which is so great that I wish I had for the first book, but it's all good. I got enough. William Shatner and one of the Beatles and one of the Monkeys and one of the Munsters. There's so many cool people who gave me lists that I'm psyched about the next book because I'm just, it's fun. It's fun doing books after, in my late age here of doing everything else I've wanted to do in life. It's cool being an actor, an author, a promoter, a man of many different hats, most of which are either in the music business or in the horror or paranormal field.
Nice. That's awesome. And that's the thing is you gotta do what you love, as best you can.
That's Naomi Grossman.
Thank you.
Naomi the actress.
Grossman. Yes. And you look at her and you say, well, I can see how they did that, but the transformation into that character is unbelievable. And she looks just like the original from whatever year, 1931, whatever the year they did the original Freaks. And there's a new book out just on that film from Bear Manor Media. That's worth, I know that because that's the publisher of my first book. But yeah, Bear Manor Media just released a complete book on the original Freaks film, and they captured her amazingly. Naomi Grossman, yeah, thank you for that.
Freaks is another movie that I will never ever watch again. That movie scared the crap out of me as a kid. Not that it was a scary film, but just the imagery was just so disturbing. And I
Yeah.
think I even had a Famous Monsters magazine that had all kinds of pictures from it, and I kept hiding it, and it kept popping up, and it was just like, go away! I don't want to look at this.
Unfortunately, there really is no comprehensive version of Freaks that survives. I mean, we have a version of it, but the version that we have is not the version that they originally released to theaters because people were so
So
upset
disturbed.
by it.
Right.
And frustratingly, the reason they were upset is because people who are shaped differently were featured in the film. That's all it was. Is people thought that that was taboo to show
Right.
somebody that was shaped differently than, you know, the average person. And it was obviously it was used to a sensationalistic effect in Freaks, but that's not to say that these actors who portrayed these people, you know, they deserved their to be in a movie too, you know, like they worked in this movie, and that was their function there, was to drive the story of this, so it wasn't completely exploitative, and I guess people were offended by that.
And
So
right, the full release or the unedited never made it out. Yeah, that reminds me, I told you the story about my mom making me watch Bride of Frankenstein. And that was in lieu of seeing the regular Frankenstein, because that just wasn't on TV then. And we didn't have streaming and Blu-rays, and we couldn't watch anything we want anytime we want.
Bride's better anyway.
Well, you know what, guys? When I finally watched Frankenstein, I watched it with my mom, and she goes, when it's over, she goes, I'm very disappointed. I go, how can you be disappointed? It was great. Boris Cole, I loved it. I loved every second of it. She goes, well, I remember as a child seeing it in the theater. And when the Frankenstein monster, the creature, is playing with the lilies and throwing the flowers in the water, he then picks up the girl and throws her in the water. And I said, and it wasn't in the TV version that we saw at the time. And I said, Mom, maybe you're imagining it, or maybe you thought that's what would have happened next, but it's not in the movie. Until years later, when I got whatever edition it was on video DVD and actually watched it again because I hadn't seen it in years, and the scene is in there. And it's unbelievably potent scene of him, he's having fun with the girl, the flowers float, of course she's going to float, he throws her in innocently and she drowns, and that's such a strong scene. And it was edited out of all the syndicated versions that it played on every channel for years and years and years. And Mom was right, it was in there. And when you mentioned Freaks being edited, we've never seen, and probably will never see, the correct version of that. It's sort of like London After Midnight, right? Is that the amazing Lon Chaney Sr. film that's never been released?
Yeah, because that's been the holy grail. There's no official footage of it, I think, right? There's just stills.
There's a small amount of footage of it, but most of at one point somebody did a recreation of it using production stills, but there is like a small amount of footage, I think, that survives, but not the complete film.
I think the only other scary movie that has that same kind of will it ever be released, but it probably could be, is the Jerry Lewis Clown Holocaust.
The day the clown died, or the day the clown cried.
I thought it would be released as soon as he died, but I bet it's not even finished. I bet there's whatever footage that sneaked out on YouTube is the only thing there is.
No, it's finished.
Yeah, well, I saw a headline, I think, as a matter of fact, either today or yesterday, that said it was supposedly they were going to release it in 2024.
Wow.
It is a finished film because people had seen it. Jerry Lewis had a copy of it, and he would screen it occasionally for people, or at least at one point he did. Maybe not later in life, but he did screen it for people. So there are people that have seen the complete film. It exists.
There's an entity that just walked by you, by the way.
No, there isn't.
I saw something in the background. There was
No.
some foreign creature there. Oh.
Oh my God. Help.
Oh my God. I wanted to backtrack a little bit here. We were talking about watching stuff on cable in the late 70s and the early 80s. And, you guys were lucky enough to really be close to see watched WOR and PIX, at the onset from when they started doing this stuff. I had a friend who had cable before we did. And on a Sunday afternoon, he'd be watching the $1 Million Movie on WOR. His parents would go out shopping. And of course, he's watching a scary movie. So he's terrified. So he calls me. I didn't have the cable, so I just had to listen to him narrate the film. And he's like, oh my God, they've got William Shatner. They're dragging him up this hill. Oh my God, Ernest Borgnine just turned into Satan. Oh my God, they're going to kill William Shatner.
And John Travolta was in that too.
Yeah. Which of course was The Devil's Rain.
Yeah.
And then there was another one where he was like telling me about the film, and he's like, oh my God, Igor just jumped into a coffin and he's sledding down the hill in the coffin.
That's great. That's great.
Which, of course,
I'm surprised he found so much to comment on in The Devil's Rain. That's a pretty slow moving film.
Yeah.
The better of that era's films was something, it was before, it predated that. It was called Mark of the Devil with Herbert Lom.
Yep.
And Herbert Lom put a name on it as a different name because he didn't want to be associated with it when it came out. And I remember seeing it in the theaters, and they actually gave vomit bags, which was genius marketing. You will be so scared you might be throwing up. And it was obviously, it wasn't that as scary to make you throw up, but it was great marketing. I love that kind of stuff. I love the William Castle marketing. I loved anything that went beyond, even, recently with the Smile movie, there was some brilliant marketing, making athletes and showing commercials of football players doing that great grin. And there's not enough of that. Blair Witch comes to mind as brilliant.
Oh, that was genius. That was sheer genius, their marketing campaign.
Because that movie would have disappeared and been, so forgotten and so unimportant. But in the terms of, the history of horror, it has its place because of its marketing campaign and how people thought it was the real deal.
The people who released. Oh, sorry, Roger. Go ahead.
No, I was going to ask you I don't remember what their marketing campaign was.
It was websites of this of this witch killing, of this whole scenario, and it told it as if it was a true story before the film came out. So people who were going to the film were thinking that was the first of the found footage films. So it looked like real lost footage, that it wasn't actors. It was no known character, no known actors. So you would believe that. I was caught up in the hoopla of it, and then it's all right. Well, it wasn't that great of a movie, but it was a great marketing campaign.
Oh, that's funny.
The people that put out Mark of the Devil was Hallmark Releasing, and they were two guys from Boston who were they were film distributors, and they were associates of American International Pictures. They were a subdivision of AIP, so they already had this history to live up to with AIP, and they really did a lot of fantastic marketing campaigns. They're the ones who put out Last House on the Left.
Yep.
And they came, they weren't the first ones to use that slogan to avoid fainting, keep repeating, it's only a movie. Only a movie.
Yeah.
Only a movie.
Genius. I love that. I love those taglines in films. I don't know if you remember a movie called It's Alive. It had this amazing commercial, and it went about the family that had the kid. There's only one thing wrong with the family, with the child. It's alive.
Yeah. But Hallmark Releasing, they were fantastic. They're the ones who put up the money for the original Friday the 13th. We have them to thank for that. In fact, Betsy Palmer used to say in her convention appearances she called them like the money men from Boston. And she said they were always sort of lurking around the set. And she was like, they were always dressed in black. They're like the men in black. She's like, oh, those are the money men from Boston. She said they were creepy.
Oh, she was a great guest. Ari Lehman, I think his name.
Yeah.
Man, he keeps up the tradition. He was that first Jason who, as a kid, jumped out, and he's this great rock and roller, and he plays conventions with his band, and he's one of the coolest guys out there, one of the best guests, and he's at so many conventions. But it's too bad Betsy isn't still with us, because she was a wonderful convention guest.
Wow. I wanted to backtrack just a little bit here and mention that I actually have one of those vomit bags from Mark of the Devil. My parents, when they saw the movie, they brought it home and I kept it.
I have one too. I didn't get it from going to the movie though. I bought it on eBay.
And
Nice.
they've since re-released the special anniversary edition that came with a reproduction vomit bag of that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That is so cool. So I think it's just about time for us to wrap things up here. So Charles, why don't you once again give us your websites and tell everyone where they can find you and all your awesome stuff online.
Well, they can't find me in the Bronx anymore because I moved too many years ago, but you can find me on these following websites for the Dracula tour to Transylvania, which won't be blurred now. We do this every year. Next year's our 25th year going to Romania on a Dracula tour, www.dractours.com. 25 years next year. It's the ultimate. We really go to Romania and have a week of horrors. Next year, we're also doing a ghost tour to England. We're going to be spending a week in England and doing the Jack the Ripper and the London Dungeon and the Tower and Whitby and really all the most haunted places in England. And we're going to do that in July of next year. And the website for that is www.toursofterror.com. For the book of top 10 horror lists, which has 100 celebrities giving their favorite horror themes, it's take off the word www.bookofTop10, the number 10, top 10 horror lists.com. For the true ghost stories of Connecticut, I am like a human plug machine. It's www.paranormalconnecticut.com, spelled out Connecticut. And finally, the Paracon that's coming to Salem next week, which is a combined horror and paranormal event with great guests and great vendors, and yours truly as your host. And I won't be plugging things like crazy there. I'll just be having fun with you guys. It's www.salemparacon.org. And it's at Salem State University, Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 6 p.m. And I think I've exhausted all my plugs.
Awesome. And Bill, where can folks find you online?
Driveanasylum.com is probably the most that collects all of my online entities. The Etsy shop where I sell Drive-In Asylum, the Facebook pages. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as Groovy Doom. And we've got a brand new issue of Drive-In Asylum that I'm working on as we speak. A couple of fantastic cover features, including I'm wearing my Scream Bloody Murder shirt that I made on Sticker Mule. Scream Bloody Murder is sort of like a low budget obscurity from 1972. And you may be thinking, oh, I saw that movie. It's the movie about the kid with a hook for a hand. It's not that one. It was two movies that came out within 6 weeks of each other, both titled Scream Bloody Murder. This was the other one. And when there was a title conflict, they retitled it My Brother Has Bad Dreams. And it showed under that title on TV, and it played theatrically at least a couple of dates under that title. But anyway, I've got the director of that film, Robert J. Emery, and two of the lead actors in it, Marlena Lustig and Paul Vincent. And that's not all. We're also bringing you an exclusive interview with the director of Deathbed, The Bed That Eats, George Barry. And Deathbed, The Bed That Eats is just one of the most gorgeous, strangest films. I'm not even going to say horror film. It's just like one of the strangest films that you'll ever see in your life. It's one of the most authentic reproductions of a nightmare on celluloid that I could describe. And you know, of course, it's an outrageous concept. It is exactly what it said. Deathbed, the bed that eats. It's about a demon that gets trapped inside of this antique bed. And there's also a corresponding manifestation of the demon in a portrait. And it's these objects are in a room in an old house somewhere. And people keep getting drawn to this area, and they sleep in the bed, and the bed digests them. It's got some really amazing sequences in it. Ultra low budget. I can't say enough good things about this movie. And we've got the director, George Barry, who's going to be in the magazine. So we're very excited about that.
Awesome. What year is that movie?
Deathbed. Well, it was made earlier, but it wasn't released until 77, I think, was the first time there was a finished cut of Deathbed. And George Barry didn't even know that the film had been distributed anywhere. He thought he just made this movie and nothing happened with it. And then somewhere he saw a copy of, or he met somebody that was like, "Hey, I saw your movie, Deathbed, the Bed That Eats." And he was like, "Huh? Where did you see that?" And it turned out like this company had purchased it from somebody and distributed it on VHS. There's a very rare VHS original release for Deathbed, the Bed That Eats. And it finally came out on DVD like in the mid 00s. Finally, it resurfaced, and we are much better off because of it.
That's awesome. Wow. I'm going to have to check that out. I know I've heard the title before. So I'm definitely going to have to check that out. Well, guys, thanks for joining me today. And folks, you can find me at havenpodcasts.com, as all my shows, including the Fright Lounge here. And if you want to send us any feedback, you can go to our live streams, which won't be live anymore pretty soon. But you can leave comments under those on facebook.com/Fright Lounge or youtube.com/user/UncleDeath1. And or you could just simply email us at havenpodcasts@gmail.com. And guys, if you want to hang around a bit while I just shut the stream off, it's gonna it was fun. We had an awesome time today.
Thank you so much for having me on, guys. I loved it.
Thank you, Charles. We're glad to have you on the show.
Yes, I'm looking forward to seeing you next week at the Salem Paracon.